Hey guys, welcome back. The last video I was talking about finally meeting a solid climbing partner out here in Colorado and learning about all these new styles of climbing that were unique to me and really getting after it. After my year at CCU, I decided to finally be done with this whole college thing and just really launch finally into the climbing thing and see what I could discover. So Ryan and I were just really getting after it. Like I said before, I was climbing 5-6 days a week and climbing harder and harder. I remember my first my first lead fall in El Dorado Canyon on traditional gear. When we had started learning how to lead climb and all this, we'd only had a set of stoppers and some old Tetons and tri cams. We didn't really have much in the way of cams, which were these expensive devices that you can get to protect yourself. But anyway, took my first lead fall though on one of our first cams that we bought, and I was doing this route called Tagger, and probably climbing a little above my what I felt comfortable leading. But I remember pulling up over this roof, up over the lip, and I think I just kind of freaked out and dropped on the gear. But it was let out a little yell, but Ryan gave me a great catch, of course, and it was great to see the system work. It was a very empowering experience, and we started heading up into the Rocky Mountain National Park and up in the Flatirons. One of my favorite trips that we did, or one of the most memorable, was this route we did up in Lockvale, up in Rocky Mountain National Park, and we were trying to do this famous route called the Petit Grippon. And so we headed up there one evening and set up a bivvy under this boulder across the valley. And we're taking a look at this tower. The Petit Grippon is like an 800-foot freestanding granite spire. It's about 12,000 feet, so it's above tree line, just a spectacular setting. So we were camped across the valley from this 800-foot granite spire and looking at our guidebook the night before as we were going to bed, and just couldn't figure out how to make it line up. Like, it didn't look like the same thing, but I mean, what other 800-foot granite spire could there be? So I didn't get much sleep that night. My thermarest popped. I just ended up sleeping on the climbing ropes. I don't think I really slept at all. But woke up the next morning, headed across the valley, and we still couldn't get the topos to line up with what we had versus what we were seeing. So we just started, first ascent style, heading up the cliff. And it was nice to know how to trad climb now, because basically any cliff that I walked up to, like, I knew how to start climbing it safely. So we just started following crack systems up the middle of this cliff, and got about 300, 400, 500 feet up, and we were feeling very committed. Like, we had to get up the thing to get off, is how it was feeling. And about 400 or 500 feet up, I remember Ryan got this one belay where basically he just wedged his body into a crack, and he had no gear he could put in. There was no gear to be had. And I got up to him where he was at. I was on top rope, and I was just like, what the heck? I can't believe you're just sitting there. Like, I could not believe that I would have been able to take a fall and he could have held me. It didn't seem like safe at all, but we didn't have another choice, and we were committed at this point. So I took off on the next lead, traversed to the left and out of sight, and just continued climbing up. Finally was able to get a little tri-cam, and really wobbly piece, the smallest tri-cam, and didn't feel good about this placement at all. But I had nothing else that I could find. Continued up and got about 10 to 15 feet above that placement. So this last little wobbly piece was way below me. And all the climbing was funneling into this section. And I could see what I was going to have to do. I was going to have to do this crazy move to get up over this overhang and onto this ledge. And I got frozen up. I mean, I was just completely terrorized, and this was the most scared I'd ever been. This was already the most epic climb I'd ever been on, and I sat there on these holds for like 20 or 30 minutes, not wanting to move, realizing that I knew I had to throw for this hold. But as I looked down below me at this wobbly tri-cam and seeing the rope disappear around me to the left, if I fell, and I didn't think that tri-cam was going to hold me, then obviously I was just going to fall and rip Ryan right out of that wedge belay, and we were going to be toast. So After about 30 minutes or whatever, I finally made a decision. Like my arms were getting more and more tired, and I had to do something. I couldn't down climb, so I just went for it, threw for the hold, and was able to get it, and just desperately scrambled up onto this ledge and let out a woohoo! And Ryan told me later that was the most relieved sound that he had ever. There was the most relieved he had ever been hearing me, hearing that sound, because here he had not seen the rope move for a good half hour and was freaking out himself. So we finally got up to that. I brought him up to that point. I was able to get some gear in, and we proceeded. Climbing got harder and harder. I mean, this is way harder than what we were expecting, like the 5.8 we were expecting on the Petit Crepin. Plus, everything was loose, and it looked like no one had ever been here before. I mean, this is the other weird thing about it. Like, this was the most popular climb in Rocky Mountain National Park, and here we were like the only ones in the entire valley, and the route that we were climbing, it looked like no one had ever been there before. There was no webbing or bolts or pitons or evidence of anyone having ever been there before. So finally got up to the summit headwall pitch. It was this like 5.9 splitter finger crack that just went vertical right up to the summit. Beautiful pitch. And made our way to the summit. Still not a soul in sight, and congratulated ourselves, but looked down valley and saw this storm rolling in. In Colorado, we get these afternoon thunderstorms like clockwork, and sure enough, it was about noon or 1, and this storm was rolling in and looked like a doozy. So we did finally find some evidence of people having been on this route. There was some kind of webbing rappel station at the top of this cliff, so we started setting up our rappel and got out of there. So to set up a rappel, what you'll do is we had a separate rope for setting up the rappel, but you tie the ropes together with a knot, and you'll rappel down the 2 ropes, and then when you get to the bottom of the rappel, you pull on one of the ropes, and then it'll bring the whole assembly flying down, and then you can reset your rappel ropes. So we got onto rappelled down to this little pedestal, about 150 feet down, and I started pulling on the ropes to get them down, and the rope got stuck. And I started just yarding on the rope as hard as I could, putting all my weight on it, and the thing would not budge. We got the storm rolling in, and we're 800 feet up this spire, just way out there in outer space, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was going to have to learn how to ascend a fixed rope, and I had never done this before. I had just recently learned how to tie a prusik hitch, but I didn't have any prusik webbing or cordelettes with me. All I had were runners, which doesn't make for the best prusiks, but I had to make do. So I wrapped these runners around the rope, and there I went, like climbing up a rope for the first time, 700 some feet off the deck, free hanging ascent of a rope, and it was totally wild. And slowly finally made my way to the top, and discovered what the problem was. I guess the knot that was tying our ropes together had gotten stuck in this little V notch, and so I was able to free the knot, rappel back down, back to our little pedestal. Well, thankfully the storm, I guess, it decided to go a different direction, so we were able to avert that disaster. But we were still way up the cliff, and once again we were seeing no evidence of climbing parties, and we weren't sure how we were going to get out of there. So we started having to just leave gear behind. We'd put a couple of stoppers and equalize it, and building anchors, and just ended up ditching probably half of our stoppers on the way down the cliff. But we learned how to rappel safely off of one stopper. If you put like one stopper in and you send down the heavy guy with the big pack, and the stopper doesn't blow out, and you've got like a backup anchor in case it does. But if that stopper holds, then theoretically you're good to go for the next guy. So we kind of used that so we could conserve our gear and have enough to get down to the bottom, and finally made it out of there. And thinking we had just climbed the Petit Crepin, maybe a different route, maybe this was the only Saturday ever that no one decided to climb it. We didn't know, but we were psyched that we had survived. got out of there. Well, a couple days later, I was in a local climbing shop in Boulder at Neptune Mountaineering, and I saw this picture on the wall saying the first ascent of Zowie. And it was this, this old picture with this epic-looking climb. And I looked at the route, this spire. I was like, hey, that's what we just climbed. So it wasn't until then that I realized we had actually climbed this other route called Zowie, not the Petit Gripan. And apparently what we had done is taken a wrong turn up the wrong valley. And there just happens to be in the adjacent valley another 800-foot granite spire that looks very reminiscent to the Petit Gripan. And apparently other parties have done this too. Anyway, we continued on like this for about a year. I was living in this house, and we were just, getting up on bigger and bigger climbs, and started to have the desire to travel again. And Ryan really wanted to go to Europe. He had been there before with his family. He was psyched about checking out the Dolomites and the Chamonix Valley, and I was really excited to start traveling again. I hadn't been out of the country since Honduras, so we started putting together a plan to head out there and see what we could find out. So on the next video, I'll talk about our 5-month trip to Europe. Thanks for joining me.